Hey everyone, Warwick's here. So I'm back with a video about Devourer DH. So this is the newest spec to WoW. Was hinted at late in the War Within's Manaforge Omega raid patch, as we saw Adar's Duxblaze, the first Void Demon Hunter. And sure enough, Blizzard announced it not too long after that we'd be getting a Void Demon Hunter's third Demon Hunter spec. So this is an intellect damage dealer that is a mid-range damage dealer, much like the Evoker is, with augmentation and devastation. So making it the second class that does tank DPS, along with Warrior, and Blood DK, third class. So there's three tank DPS classes, and that is now DK, Demon Hunter, and Warrior. And what I want to do in this is kind of give my initial thoughts and what I think is good about the loop of Devourer Demon Hunter, and some things that I think need to be looked into. Now, there are two distinct build playstyles depending on the hero talents. Right now, I've been messing around lately just leveling as Void Scarred, which is the quote-unquote melee hybrid playstyle. These are things like Hungering Slash, The Hunt, and things like Vengeful Retreat to perform like a little melee combo before you get out here, and then you start casting things like Void Ray, Consume, and then things like Soul Immolation. And then, of course, Reap as well. So, and then the Annihilator playstyle focuses more on the more casting stuff, where you focus more heavily on things like Void Ray, and then having long windows. I've been messing around with the Soul Glutton spec for the melee hybrid, where you get into your Void Metamorphosis more often. Doesn't necessarily last as long, and then the caster playstyle tries to extend that one Void Metamorphosis as long as possible, with some fun differing playstyles. And where I'm at in story is I'm getting some things with the Void Storm. I'm in that zone right now. Even though I'm level 90, I'm doing that zone and enjoying myself out there. It's a beautiful zone. So what I want to do is kind of talk about like just the distinct playstyles. It's not necessarily meant to be a guide video, but there are some things in the talent tree, particularly in the Devourer tree, that I have some real problems with. Number one, there are talents that are pretty far down the tree that I feel like serve zero fucking purpose. I've been on record quite a bit that things that are quote improved talents or do things that modify abilities in very minuscule ways that should just be baked baseline. And there are quite a few of those already in this tree. For example, Second Helping. Reap gains an additional charge. Like, the reality is that you should just be baking that into Reap baseline. If this is the only thing it does. Now, I use Fury Warrior as an example. There's a talent that gives Raging Blow a second charge, but it also gives Raging Blow a little bit of a damage increase. So that feels more and worthy of an talent point investment. Whereas here, Reap only gains the additional charge. Right next to it, Umbral Blade. Reap's cooldown is reduced by your haste. Again, this is all that it does. This is silly as a talent. Now, if you took these two talents and combined them, so Second Helping and Umbral Blade, so you get a second charge of Reap and its hasted cooldown, that's a talent point that's worth investing. Right below it, Void Rage gives you 2% mastery. You're spending 2 points for 4% of a secondary stat. This is incredibly stupid. This is incredibly stupid. I don't like this. I hate this on any talent. Like, I hate talents that all they do is give 2% speed. Like, Obduracy on Paladin gives like speed and AoE damage reduction. You know, you gain, like the Warrior tree has like, oh, you gain movement speed, and then has another talent that gives you Leech. Like, I hate those talents. I take them because they're useful, but they're dumb. I don't like them. We kind of have some things like that over here. Like this. I'm spending 2 points to gain 10% leech, but I also gain an extra 10% leech while in metamorphosis. So I gain a total of 20% leech for 2 points while in your metamorphosis form. Like, that's good. We like that. So things like that are good. But here I'm wasting 4 talent points on something that, give like mastery and avoidance, or mastery and speed, or mastery and bake something like Calamitous into this talent, where all of a sudden, I deal an extra 20% crit strike damage and you gain 4% crit strike. That's a talent point worth investing 2 points into. So Calamitous, obviously, we're going to talk about that. It goes from there. So, like, there's, these 4 talents in particular stand out. as talents that are like they feel kind of useless. Let's talk about soul immolation. So soul immolation you get as an ability early on, but then right below it you can make it a complete passive RNG ability or give it a second charge and a 30-second cooldown. Right now, almost everybody that I've seen is playing passive soul immolation because it's just one less thing to deal with. Which means, what purpose does it serve? I think they need to do something with soul immolation to make it interesting. Because right now, I mean, basically all you're doing is doing damage to yourself and shattering soul fragments. Like, that's dumb to keep track of. If it did something to your enemy, like, hey, you immolate the soul of your enemy, causing small amount of damage to yourself and X amount to a maximum of 8 targets, or reduce damage beyond 5 targets even, and shattering 3 soul fragments plus 1 for every enemy hit, then all of a sudden, like, soul immolation might be really good for some really on-demand burst generation. But right now, like, it's given the impression that it's an ability, but then immediately it gets taken away. So, like, figure out something to do with soul immolation. The other big thing talent wise that I want to look into is I feel like there needs to be more options, because this side of the tree with Void Ray, like, Void Ray is such a big part of your ability that anything that boosts Void Ray's damage you're taking. So, like, this part of the tree right here is used in both builds. I think you'll be better off moved to the middle, where it's a lot more accessible and you open up connections to get to this left side of the tree, which allows for more melee focused abilities. So, like, for example, I can't get Soul Forge Blades. Getting a free 15% critical strike chance on that ability may not be bad, or may not be great, but it's something. Even here, I can't take Demonic Instinct, which gives me, like, both main abilities that we do. Having more Void Blades, being able to hit, and then, of course, the Hunt being what it is. Like, I think these talents are so important that this middle part of the tree feels extremely ignored as a result. So I'd like to see some cleanup with the pathing in the tree. The Apex talent is fine. It is whatever. The last thing I would like to see is I would like to see Void Blade and Hungering Slash be a little bit more prominent within the Void Scar tree. Because Void Scar only works while basically is empowered by how often you get into Metamorphosis. So that's why we take something like Soul Glutton, because it requires less time to get into that. The more Void Metamorphosis you get, the more off of your Void Scar you're grabbing. So, like, it makes sense to do that. So yeah, there's some issues with the talent tree, and the same is the case for our caster build, which focuses a little bit more on the Void Ray stuff, minus Eradicate, which you can easily pull a point out of Second Helping for, or you can grab a point out of Rolling Torment to grab it, or even Calamitous, because again, I think this talent is kind of eh. But yeah, so overall, like, the Spec Tree needs some cleanup. It needs a little bit more polish. Probably move some things around, but there needs to be some extra nodes here that add quite a bit of that add a little more depth to the gameplay, other than these just, like, passive stuff. Like, if you feel like you have to have a talent for an additional charge of Reap, combine it with something like Umbral Blade, where not only do you get a second charge, but now your haste affects the cooldown of Reap, which would be very good because it makes things like absorbing your soul fragments a lot easier, especially if you're trying to have to plant for a thing, and go from there. Now, what about the gameplay loop? Now, the gameplay loop is, I think in both cases, really, really simple, and I am both okay and not okay with that. I'm okay with it because the floor for the spec is pretty easily obtainable. The min-maxer side of things, that, the people that are playing World First Skills, or the people that enjoy min-maxing everything they can out of their spec, I think will struggle to find the fun in min-maxing the spec until they get extremely geared. This spec, for Annihilator in particular, is going to guzzle haste. Now I'm only sitting at 9% with leveling gear on. You're only getting 412 haste right now. Like, so I'm obviously very low on haste, and that makes the spec feel a little less good, which is a concern. But the gameplay loop for this spec is a lot of consume spam. Like, you can walk around and pick these up, trying to get to your 50. Like, I'm just trying to build this up. And then, you get your Void Ray, which doesn't always automatically crit. And then when I go in, of course, because of your talents, you automatically get a Collapsing Star. And then now you're basically in a race. Let's try and get another one. Now, the good thing is that it slows down significantly while you're in your Collapsing Star or in your Void Ray. So, like, that's good. But, like, I mean, even at 9% haste, like, this isn't bad. But as soon as a mechanic comes into play, like, it works out a lot better. And the thing is this spec requires 2 charges of Reap in order for it to function effectively, in my opinion. Now, the fact that I've gotten 2 Collapsing Stars out of this is actually pretty good. That's not a bad run. The gameplay loop is 3 buttons. Like, Beast Mastery Hunter, early Havoc Demon Hunter. Even those specs have a little bit more engagement in there. Now, are there things, like, in the caster build, you don't use things like a Void Blade at all. There's no point to it. There's no talents to boost it. So having it is pointless. So there's nothing, like, you have one proc to react to as an Annihilator, and that is your Void Stars. And you just hit Reap and go from there. There's no proc-based gameplay to this. Nothing that you can high roll and get some solid things. Like, it's a consistent, steady damage profile, which is not bad. It's not a bad thing at all. I'm a fan of that in some ways. But the gameplay loop gets very repetitive and dull very, very quickly. And I have big concerns about that. The other thing is that the spec in AoE feels rough. There's no talent that does something like allows consume to cleave. So when you're not Void Raying, or you're not hitting Collapsing Star, or you're not even hitting like an Eradicated Reap, you're doing no AoE damage. And it's not like Havoc where you have like Immo Aura that allows you to have like consistent little AoE output. Like, the spec is very much built and designed around single target right now. It doesn't have really good AoE options, and that outside of Collapsing Star. Like, the whole spec is built around your Collapsing Star damage, and I think that's a concern for me when it comes to the AoE side of things in particular, but just generally speaking. Like, the whole damage profile is built around getting this massive Collapsing Star, which is a fun ability. It is satisfying to press. It is satisfying to watch get pulled off. It is satisfying to see it float down and smash your enemies, do a bunch of AoE damage, and hit everything really hard. Like, I'm not going to lie, that is very satisfying. My concern is that if that's the only carrot that you're chasing, and everything else is built and designed to just chase that carrot, the spec is going to get dull and people are going to walk away from it. So that's the concern with the Annihilator more caster-based playstyle. Is there some fun based into it? Yes. Are there things that you could absolutely do to, are there things that you can do to try to min-max it? Yeah, things like really good shift usage is going to be really important on this spec. It allows you to focus more on doing mechanics without potentially losing that much damage. You can cast, consume, and devour on the move. As you can see, I'm moving around right now. We're hopping around. You even double jump while doing it. Like, the only thing is you can't glide while you're doing it. Or you can. You just can't initiate a glide while you're doing it. So, like, there is going to be fun. The spec is mobile. It makes you pretty good in utility. It makes you very capable, and with shift being as good as it is, it has a pretty decent range on it. Like, you're going to be capable of doing the quote-unquote mechanic job. So if there's a mechanic that takes you far away from a boss, you're going to be able to do that. That's perfectly fine. And I think there's value in that to a raid team. The problem is, like I said, the core gameplay loop of the spec is incredibly simple, but it's hard to figure out where the min max is coming in, other than just this person has higher item levels, so they load it up on haste. Because the spec, I think, is I'm very worried that it's going to absolutely guzzle haste. Like you're not going to hit a this haste is too much until you're at like 90% haste. That said, it's probably going to be like a very peak PI target. So priest out there, make note you probably want to PI your devourer, particularly once they hit void meta form. But it's gonna be interesting. Why am I still in combat? Let's do this. All right. We're back. Sorry, had a weird bug where I got stuck in combat inside Silver Moon City, so I had to come to Stormwind in order to get that taken care of. So I'm going to switch over now to the Void Scarred, quote-unquote, melee hybrid style of play. This one is a build that I find to be a little bit more fun. Has a little bit more variety into it, but I share a lot of the same concerns. So there's no good setup here for this. We'll do this. So the thing about the Scarred playstyle is that all it does is add one button, and that's Void Blade into Hungering Slash. So you still start off by doing the same. You're going to want to, get your training dummy out here, or get your consumes out. But here you can actually go in, hit your combo, and then Vengeful Retreat out. That's the basic one. Now, the other thing is that you have the ability to, and then of course we do this where we get into this a little bit earlier, and then you can hunt in, Void Blade, Hungering Slash, get out, and then you want to, do this. Like, I'm still figuring out the gameplay loop. So the gameplay loop does add a little bit more to it where you do go into melee. However, the one thing I would love is that there's more of a reason to stay in melee once you're in there. Maybe add another ability that allows you to, like, Hungering Slash, and then you scythe something in a single target AoE, and then you dash out and go from there. So there's still something to the gameplay loop that I would like to see. So it just adds that one where you just combine the hunt in with everything else. Now, the thing is just gives you, like, cosmic damage, whereas, like, the Havoc one, like, really emphasizes the hunt. But the Void Scarred gameplay loop, it's going to be always subject to the tuning of Hungering Slash. If Hungering Slash hits good enough, then I think this gameplay style will see quite a bit of play. If Hungering Slash hits like a wet noodle, then I'm worried that it's not going to see any play. And this is personally speaking, my preferred play style. But that said, it's still very simple. It goes from a 3-button spec to a 4-button spec. And then with the gameplay talents that I set up is that it emphasizes getting into Void meta faster and more often, but not necessarily having longer ones. So there are two interesting gameplay loops. I think they need to do a little bit more to define them. So, the build does focus more on the left-hand side. Like I said, there are talents that I would love to go chase. For example, like I would love to get Devourer's Bite, just because that would be quite nice. But, like, you're talking about these small windows where you can't really extend them out for very long because the Hunt and the Void Blade do have their cooldowns that they have. Like, Void Blade has a 30-second cooldown, the Hunt is a minute and a half, so you can only really get that on this 90-second wall cycle, which is not very good. So they need to do some refinement to this spec talent tree, even for the melee side, the melee hybrid style, and I would like to see maybe another ability thrown in to help with the melee hybrid playstyle. Make it a little bit more complex to play. Not hard, but a little more complex. Like you have one more thing to track. But with the mobility through Vengeful Retreat and through Shift and stuff like that, like I still think there's a lot of value to be gained out of the spec itself. So like it's still pretty mobile, all things considered, and that feels good. Demon Hunter itself feels really good. So knowing that there's hopefully still more dev time to come in on class changes and stuff like that, out of scale of 1 to 10, what would I rate Devourer right now? The caster playstyle, I rate like a 4 or 5. It's really repetitive. It's kind of dull, and it's going to require a very heavy haste gear stack in order for it to really feel like you're accomplishing something. I'm pretty concerned about how it's going to ramp up. Like its ramp up time feels like it's a little excessive for it to really start doing big damage. Now, getting a free Cosmic Star once you go into Void Metamorphosis is a huge, huge healthy boon to the spec. It's very, very good to have that talent over in the Annihilator tree, I believe. So, like, it's very, very healthy to have that. But, like, I think they need to do more to either add, like, a proc that you react to through an ability or do something with soul immolation so that it becomes a more interesting part of the spec. Because right now, it being passive is, like, entirely redundant. And the fact that it does damage to you in order to shatter soul fragments potentially could be trolly if you're taking, like, this heavy single target damage mechanic and then you get a soul immolation proc and that's what kills you. Like, it's going to be hilarious the first time I die to soul immolation because it's going to happen. It's going to happen. As for the Scarred playstyle, I think there's something more, like I said, I'd like another melee ability to kind of incentivize staying in melee for just slightly longer than what you are now. You know, you hit the Hungering Slash, the Void Blade Hungering Slash combo, and then hit maybe like this big ability once Void Blade is on cooldown, and it has a cooldown that's like equal length to the Void Blades. Like you Void Blade Hungering Slash, and then I hit my 3 button to do like this big like scythe ability. Or it could even be something as simple as like a Chaos Strike. It does like a decent amount of damage on, you know, on a 30-second cooldown. You know, maybe the more soul fragments you have, the better, or it does more damage when you're in void meta. Things like that you can do just to add a little bit of flair to the gameplay loop. Neither spec has any procs that you have to react to, which is good or bad depending on your point of view on that. And there's no other cooldown to use other than void meta. So it's very much like one note. The melee hybrid playstyle, I'm going to give it around a 6. Like I said, I want it to have a little bit more to it. So overall, the spec just kind of feels meh, even with not great gear. Like I'm barely at, 190 item level. Like that's like basically end of leveling track. I haven't done much to gear up dungeons. By the time we get into dungeons, I'm probably going to be in the mid 210s for item levels. So like there's still a lot of item level to get and stat optimization to do. But even then, like the spec just feels like it lacks something on the core level. On a foundation level, they're cooking something. There's something that's here. There is a gameplay loop that I think is really, really fun and interesting sitting here. They just need to do a little bit more polish to try and pull that out of the spec, whether that's adding an ability, adding a proc, or whatever the case may be. And they need to look into the options for the spec for AoE. Right now, it feels very single target oriented. It's going to be a little miserable to play in keys, like the few small dungeons that I've done. And by the time I feel like I'm getting damage out, it feels like everything's almost dead. So there is that concern. It may not be a great dungeon spec, but hopefully it's maybe a good raid spec. We've seen that with specs in the past where they're just not good in AoE, but they're really good in single target. I hate when that happens, but it happens. I think Devourer might end up in that same spot. And then, like I said, the melee hybrid playstyle, much more fun, feels much more active, feels much more... feels much more almost like action combat oriented, which I really like. And so hopefully that allows for, more skill expression to be done when you go in and Void Blade, when you're Hungering Slash, things of that nature. I know for a fact, same thing, I'm going to kill myself doing it just like I've killed myself Fell Blading. And an ability like the Hunt, it's really fun to use. Like, I would love that. And the Hunt does give you a little bit of an opener, where you hunt in, Void Blade, Void Slash, Vengeful Retreat out, and then hit your Consume, so that you can begin that process. And then you do the combo again once the hunt is back up. So, like, it's kind of interesting, or you can do it, like, every 30 seconds. Like, there's options, but, like, yeah. There's a little bit more fluidity or more openness to the gameplay of the melee hybrid style. I would like to see something that emphasizes the melee part of it a little bit more. So that are my thoughts on Devourer Demon Hunter. I think it's a pretty meh spec right now because it feels like it's missing something on both playstyles. But there are a lot of other things that I think are really good about the spec. Void Ray feels great to press. Reap looks really cool. Like visually, it's really cool. Shift is a fun button to use. There's going to be a lot of fun skill expression with Shift. Um, Collapsing Star and Void Metamorphosis look awesome. So there's a lot of good things with the spec. I don't want to discount the work that they've done into it, but it just definitely feels like it needs a little bit more time to cook in the oven, this beta, before it hits pre-patch / live. So definitely something that we want to be on the lookout for. Hopefully after the Thanksgiving holiday, they will be doing more with this. So let me know what you think below. What are your thoughts on Devourer Demon Hunter? If you've played it on beta at all. Remember to like, share, subscribe, send to your friends that are consider playing Demon Hunters or will be playing Demon Hunters. I'd love to get their thoughts and their process, and maybe, I will be working on learning as much about all 3 Demon Hunter specs as I can throughout the course of the beta, and video guides will be hopefully dropping pretty early in March. Not maybe on the day of... Actually, I would love to have them in before pre-patch, and then I'll do some level 90 guides once we get a little bit of time into midnight. So if you have friends that are considering playing Demon Hunter and you've loved my guides that I've done before, go ahead and send them my information now. Tell them to subscribe to me, because I will be doing a lot of Demon Hunter videos over the course of this beta, and be, like I said, try to do guides come pre-patch, and then level 90 guides once we get into the early part of midnight. And then I'm looking to do a lot more in terms of little guide videos for all 3 specs. Little things like using your defensives properly, or using, how to time your damage amps, little movement techniques that you can use to try and maximize your uptime, little things like that I've always intended to do and never done before. I'm fully committing to doing that now, particularly with Demon Hunter, maybe even with DK and Druid, or the 3 classes that I'm really considering playing after Demon Hunter. So until the next video, hope you all stay safe, hope you enjoy yourself, you're having fun, you keep on gaming. We'll see you next time.